empathy? An emotional connection or an imaginative leap? What exactly is empathy? German psychologists coined the term more than a century ago, and now it has two main meanings. The traditional approach is to think of empathy as an emotional connection between people. A different approach, and one that I believe is essential to the art of living, is empathy a leap of imagination to understand the world from another person's perspective. When you open up a psychology textbook, you usually encounter the first approach, which defines empathy as the ability to share or participate in the emotional lives of others. In other words, we can feel what another person feels. For example, when you feel anxious, when you see the face of a child crying anxiously. Every time you tremble when you see someone in pain, you are showing empathy. This sharing of experience differs from sympathy. When your response doesn't mirror theirs, such as pitying someone who feels helpless after the death of a family member, such empathy is usually seen as an innate quality over which we have little control, a product of our nature that often competes unpleasantly with our selfish inner desires, our aggressions and cruelty. In recent decades, social psychologists and evolutionary biologists have emphasized this previously neglected aspect of our being and social relationship. They argue that it is as natural to feel the pains and joys of others, and to suffer or enjoy with them as it to feel concern for our own well-being. We all have this capacity for empathy, although it may be more developed in some groups than others, such as women more than men, controversial thing, or among family members more than strangers. Neuroscientists have conducted experiments that show how our empathic feelings toward others differ from our feelings toward ourselves. The image shows the differences seen when people imagine their finger being pushed through the door versus when they imagine the same thing happening to someone else. Different neural mechanisms are at work. Different parts of the brain light up when we think ourselves in pain. And when we think of someone else in pain, our ability to participate in the emotional lives of the others individuals is apparently the result of an evolutionary constraint. A mother who feels the pain of her children is more likely to care for them and ensure their survival. And community members who are sensitive to the needs and sufferings of each other can be more successful, especially if they depend on each other in some way, such as for food or protection. But what I'm interested in here is a different kind of empathy, but one that involves expanding yourself beyond your ego and self-interest. It is empathy as the imaginative act of stepping into another person's shoes and seeing the world from their perspective. This requires developing an understanding of their hopes, fears, ambitions, beliefs, prejudices, and other aspects of their worldview. Seeing the world from the perspective of others is sometimes called perspective taking. We do it all the time, and it can be seen in common praise like, "I see what you're thinking. I really know where you are. What must he feel?" Or, "Wouldn't you have to be him?" Unlike the first form of empathy, the second type of perspective-taking empathy is a product of nurture rather than nature. A part of our nature that we have more power to influence and develop. I think it is an art that can be cultivated. But how do you do that? The art of empathic imagination. The Christian tradition contains a seemingly precious ideal that you should do to others like you would have them do to you. The problem is that it prioritizes your perspective over theirs. George Bernard Shaw knew this when he quipped, "Do not do unto others as you would have them do unto you. They may have different tastes. If I like chicken soup, maybe not. If we want to take empathy seriously, we should instead try to imagine the other person's perspective, desires, wishes, and beliefs." This is perhaps the essence of Mahatma Gandhi's most famous empathetic statement. I remember the first time I read this quote, I felt a chill run down my spine, as if I had suddenly gained access to the truth about humanity. I give you a talisman. When in doubt or feeling overwhelmed, use the following test. Remember the face of the poorest and weakest person you have ever seen, and ask yourself whether your prudent step will benefit him. Will he get anything out of it? Will this put him back in control of his life and destiny? In other words, will it lead to swarage of freedom for the hungry and spiritually starved millions? That you realize your doubts and your meltdown. There is much beauty and wisdom in this quote. First, it is a moral framework that each of us can follow to consider the perspective of the most marginalized members of society in all of our decisions and make sure that they benefit in some way. This is also a guide for facing our own existential difficulties. When we feel paralyzed by doubt or trapped by problems and obsession to the point that we do not know what to do next, we can find liberation through an empathetic imagination that suggests the path we should. A talisman can bring clarity to a state of confusion or indecision.